Archuleta, a man that probably doesn't need much for an introduction. Ray and I were just chatting before the webinar. His personal influence on me, the intrinsic value that he has added to both our farm and Covers & Co. In the early days, there just weren't that many influencers to follow around, and I was a Ray Archuleta groupie. If Ray was speaking anywhere within a 6-hour radius of me, generally I was there to listen. So Ray, for those people that don't know who you are, maybe introduce yourself. For those people that do know who you are, just before we get into it, just what are you up to these days? So I'll try my best not to interrupt you, Ray, but tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll dive into the presentation.
Well, thank you, Joe. I tell you what, I really appreciate that little time that we had before we started. I want to thank you for having me, Joe, and I want to say hello to my Canadian brothers and sisters across the border. I'm sorry that you're having such a cold winter. I was in Regina in Winnipeg, maybe about a month ago or so. And I'm going to tell you, I wanted to winter kill up there. I'm a warm season cover crop. I live here in Missouri. I live in the border. I live between the border of Arkansas. I'm about maybe 20, 30 miles from Arkansas border as a crow flies. I retired from the federal government about 7 years ago. I was a federal employee working for what you called Soil Conservation Service, or now it's called Natural Resource Conservation Service. The agency was started about 90 years ago because we were having the Dust Bowl, major conservation issues on the land. And I started my career, I put in 30 years and I retired about 7 years ago. So I worked in 4 different states. I've been in every state. And you asked me what I've been doing lately. In the last 20 months, I think I've been in 6 continents teaching regenerative agriculture as a soil health specialist. And so in the last 6, 7 years, I made sure I bought my own farm. And so that, Joe, so I could beat the expert out of me. I think one of the most humbling things you could do is buy a farm and ranch yourself, because you can teach the science, but it's a total different story when you have your own operation, and it teaches you a lot of humility. So that's what I've been doing, teaching all over the world, consulting still, because I really believe this. This is going to change the world as it changed your life and my life. So I'm here to share that journey with the people that are here tonight.
Cool. Well, I gave you some, I guess what I was looking for, Ray, but I was upfront with you, whatever direction you want to take this. I've already started jotting down notes. So why don't you dive into it? And
Okay.
we've already got some questions coming in on the chat. So apologies about the interruptions, but you take off and I'll try
Okay.
to pick in where I see fit.
Okay. Well, Joe, and thank you again, all of you. As you notice that first slide, I did that slide. And it all started here as a new framework of thinking, something that happened to me. And I explain, I'm going to show you a quick pictorial journey of what happened. And notice that last part of that phrase, agriculture that emulates nature's design. This is one of the things I was not taught in school. And we'll touch upon that in a second. But before I do that, that's the Ozark Mountains where I live. And that's my wife, Sonia. Joe and I were talking about how we have amazing wives. I couldn't do what I do without my precious wife, Sonia. Uh, she was born in the Independence, and she was a city girl. I grew up in town. We became ranchers, and she loved ranching. She's good at it. So, how did it start for me? The journey you could see here. It really started about 2007. I got promoted in the agency, and I was sent to North Carolina. And they said, "Well, Ray, you're going to be a soil health specialist." And this is kind of like I kind of laugh. I got this picture of American Airlines and how they fly all over, or United was one of them. Well, this has been my journey, and I think Gabe and I have traveled. But why do I travel? Why do I do this? Why am I so impassioned? It first started with me, and I told Joe I lived in Idaho, and I worked in Oregon, and I was an agronomist, and I was a district conservation. It was right here. It was called the Brownlee Reservoir. It's in Idaho. This is a picture of the reservoir in the summer where sediment was taken into the reservoir by irrigation. And this was a very common thing. And I said to myself, okay, why is this happening? We have spent millions and millions of dollars. And it bugs me to no end at my border where the beautiful Snake River would go into that reservoir, and this is the way it would look from an aerial. And another thing that just absolutely chapped my hide, we've been doing this for 90 years. 90 years. The government has spent billions of dollars. And look at this, it's 2014 in Colorado. And then I show this picture on the right, 1935, an organic system. And I said, folks, we've destroyed already a majority of our soils before the 30s in an organic system. There was no chemistry. It was done by tillage, overgrazing, and it was really all about misappropriation of the tools. And the reason I put organic, because I think sometimes, and I love organic and I buy organic, but I tell my organic brothers and sisters, I love my organic brothers and sisters, but you till too much. I tell my no-tillers, you spray too much. And then I tell both of them, and in the conventional, well, I came from the conventional system, but poor rotations, not giving the land rest, and too much disturbance leads to this and what was talked about. And the final thing that really chapped my hide, and this graph is really from Canadian net farm income, but it mimics the United States like a mirror image. If you look from the 1920s, who was making the money? Who is making the money? And same here in the United States. We have the same issue that's happening in Canada. And it really led to this, folks. Back when I was, like I was telling Joe, I was only like 40 years old. And I couldn't see, why can't you farm 500 prime acres of irrigated ground and can't support two family members? And people laughed in my face. Are you serious, Ray? So you're going to have two families supported by 500 acres? And I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Why do we need so many acres? What's going on? Well, the graph before makes it very clear. The money is going to the tool makers. It's not going to the farmer and rancher. I have a saying, the land, the blessings of the land used to flow through the farmer and rancher, and it was distributed to the local community, to the general store, to the shoemakers, that's where the wealth went. The wealth now has gone to corporate America, to the tool makers, the people that sell the tools. And that bothered me. Those were the two things. Couldn't get the water clean, and we were having issues, and I could see that rural America was going broke and could not see. And you know what my peers said? Well, Red, just get over it and just push the money out. Couldn't ask questions. And then I started to realize this is the thing that's gone on a global scale. And I call it social conditioning. Well, what is social conditioning? Well, conditioning is like this. They did a study where they had this large fish in this aquarium, and they put a plexiglass as a barrier. It was clear. The fish, the big predator fish, could not see it. On the other side of that plexiglass, they put its food, what the fish eats. Oh, so what happens? So the big predator fish would bang against that clear plastic and could not get to the fish. It was being conditioned and continuously until finally what the scientists did, pulled the big piece of glass out, or that plexiglass, and then those fish, its food, would swim right around that fish and it would not attack it. It was being conditioned. Well, in agriculture, we have conditioned the generations. We're conditioned by our grandparents. We're conditioned by our universities. We're conditioned by our communities, our work, where we work at. We condition each other. We create a mindset. And if somebody questions that, they attack that person because you're not fitting the mold, the condition. It's a fixed mindset. We do that we do that in our communities. We do it at home. So when your son comes up to you and say, "Hey, Dad, why don't we try something different on the farm?" "Oh, no, no, no. This is the way Grandpa did it, the way condition. It's a global problem. We're very tribal. That's why I love raising sheep. Humans are like sheep. COVID's a good example of what we did in COVID. Just like sheep, we believe the experts. And so if you want, that's one thing I just cringe when the word expert. And so we become very easily conditioned. And another thing I learned in college, that reductionist mechanicistic science and Descartes way back in the 1600s has carried it out. All modern agriculture, all biological science think this way. They feel like they can ex- understand the complexity of nature from a mechanicistic point of view. Horrible. It still happens today. Very reductionist. Reductionist means this, where we have broken everything up into pieces: the human body, the natural system. This is a great picture of my college education. Each of those are in pieces: chemistry here, ecology here, biology here, plant pathology here. 8 years of university, I walked away like this, very fragmented. And fortunate for me, through trials, searching, and reading the book on holistic medicine, holistic science, holistic thinking by Ellen Savory. It was Ellen Savory's book that I read on holistic management. That's what changed me. And then going to Gabe's Ranch in 2007, and it was November. Let me give you an explanation just to show you guys how reductionist we is. When I go all over the country, first thing people say, no-till doesn't work, cover crops don't work, reductionist, conditioning. It's too dry, it's too wet. I'm telling you, Joe, for going all over the world, those are the three things I hear: reductionist. First thing they throw at you, well, it's too dry, it's too cold. All these things, that's the first reductionist thought process we go. We reduce things, but never do we ask this: what do all those ecoregions have in common? Biology, life. Guess what? Even in the driest areas, look at this. This is a picture of bacteria in the sand. Life dominates every region of the planet. It's ubiquitous with bacteria, organisms. This is what I missed. You know what else college did a really good job? Teaching me that it's all about chemistry and physics, but they didn't teach me the most powerful force on the planet is life itself. I love showing this rock, and I tell farmers, that's compaction, guys. How do you fix that compaction issue? And then I said, how do you do that? And nobody knows how to answer that. How does that tree survive? I said, life. The biggest geological force on this planet is life itself. That tree makes association with fungi and bacteria, break rock down. It releases acids, break rock down. I love showing this picture. You know, people complain about their farms. My soil is not that great. Well, mine in the Ozarks, it's rock. And I said, well, how come it's dark up here? How did you take that gypsum calcium seabed and salts, elemental salts, and how did it make it life? This dark color, life. So, but here's the point that I want to push forward, guys. What I was taught is, it was not taught that the plant and soil are one. They're one unit. If I pull the plant, you have no soil biology. You have geology. They're one unit. So the moment you pull that crop out and you don't put a cover crop, it's no longer one. Our number one job on the farm and ranch is this. I love showing this. How do you turn light photon energy, the light, and leak liquid sun every square inch? Job's pretty simple. How do we capture sun 24/7 as much as possible? So the more I capture new sunlight, I don't have to use ancient sunlight, fertilizer, pesticides, chemicals. I want to have light eaters on my farm. Those are the light eaters. I want them eating light and pooping it out and feeding this. These are my organisms. This is what I missed in college. Everywhere I teach in the United States, I don't care if it's Canada, Alaska, Canada, all over the world, Latin America, Europe, we were not taught about how powerful these organisms. So the more you disc these critters and the more you spray them and the more you manipulate it, because The top 2-3 inches, the majority of the biological life is in the top 2-3 inches. And then let me show you this one here. I love showing this one. This is the protozoa is grazing around an air bubble eating bacteria. This is what it's about. This is what I was not taught in college. This is what we all missed in the majority of our schools. It's called soil ecology. We missed this. I don't care if
Ray,
you're a
I
forester.
gotta,
Yes, go ahead.
I gotta interrupt you, and it pains me when Ray Archuleta's on a heater that I'm interrupting. But I have to add a story, a little bit of context.
Sure.
My right hand man this summer, who was our summer student at Covers and Co, helped us build Field of Dreams. I'll text you some pictures. But he's taking an agriculture diploma and just finished his soils class. So he was out. We were having a visit, and very smart kid. I'm positive he got an A or an A plus in soils. And I said, Jace, let me ask you a question. How are soils built? He had two answers for me: volcanic eruptions and glacial till. Would that
Oh
not be
my.
helpful information if you're graduating with an agriculture diploma or degree to understand how the soil is formed and how it functions? But we're not doing that. But
No, this is what this is a
he could
picture, Joe.
list the horizons. Uh, I'm sure he could get them exactly right, but what does that have to do with anything?
And I tell people, thank you for bringing that, Joe, because I don't care about the horizons. People say, well, how dare you, Ray? You're blasphemous, and I'm a soil scientist. This is what I care about, guys. They cycle it. They create the aggregates. They create life. They do this. So if you overgraze, you overtill, you overspray, you overdisc, or you don't put a cover at the end of the year, you hurt these critters. They're the ones. Let me show you what happens. This is no-till by itself on the left side. No-till without covers. Look at the stratification. 3 years of cover crops. Boom. This is the way a soil is supposed to look like. That's the natural design of a soil. It's got aggregates. Aggregates of the fusion, this little cottage cheese, the little granular structure. The microbes live in those pores. They fuse the sand, silts, and clays by superbiotic glues. Organisms do that. If you don't have aggregation, you have no infiltration. The picture on the right is a healthy, functioning soil. This is a typical soil throughout. When I pull out a shovel, that's what I typically see. And so I want to show something real quick. So I want to stop here because I think I want to leave you with this last. Let me just stop here quick, and then let me start real quick here because I think the audience needs to really see this because I want you guys to have this concept. Look, the windows to the soul, the human soul is the eyes. The shovel is the window to the soul of the soil. First thing I do when I get a shovel is I do this. This is a picture showing a windrow that has not been farmed. This is the farm acres. If Joe invited me to his field, or any of you invited me to your farm, first thing I do is I walk to the edge, a grass strip, something has not been disturbed for 30, 40, 50 years, and I do this. Windrow, the way we farm. This is the way. Proper grazing, improper grazing. So I had to show you that because at the end of the day, our biggest issues that we have is this, and I'll back up again and wrap it up, and we'll take it into questions. I think I have my slide out here because I usually, well, I guess I don't have it, but my slide, it does this. I'll leave it here. Let's put it here, and we'll wrap it up. I have a slide. It's called Death by Tools. The issue a majority of our times is we spray too much, we overhay, we disc too much, we leave the ground bare, we don't cover it enough, we don't capture enough sun. So overspraying, and notice I didn't say you couldn't till. I didn't say not to spray. Didn't say that. But when we use fungicides and insecticides and herbicides, and we use the tools carelessly, then the soil looks like what I just showed you. So farmers can tell me, well, I'm a good farmer. I said, really? Let's get a shovel and let's walk out to the edge of your field and let's see what the soil tells me. So here are the things I want you to walk away with. When I walk, I broke it down to 4 basic things, the 4. And I know the 6. First thing is cover with diversity of management. Look at that, management, rotational diverse, no prescribed grazing, intercropping. Don't do the same thing over. Diversity of management, plants, integrate insects and animals. Diversity, diversity, diversity. And you know what the biggest struggle I have, Joe, with farmers? Diversity, getting diversity into the farm. The center one is context. Understand your ecological, your cultural, social, your spiritual context. And I left one out, economic context. Context, context, context. The other one you see, limit physical, biological, and chemical disturbance. Careful with your disturbances. And the last one, you notice what I have there is work in relationship with others in community. I have this saying, if you guys work by yourself, good luck. You're going to spend the rest of your time trying to figure it out. I'm 64 years old. If the good Lord gives me, I may have 16 more years. I don't have 16 years. I have 16 opportunities. Joe's in his 30s. He doesn't have 60 years. He has 60 opportunities, 60 chances, and it takes a whole year. But if I have 5 or 7 farmers in my group, now I have 5 or 10 years of research in 1 year. Don't work by yourself. Work in a community.
Well,
Joe
and Ray,
yes, sir.
it,
I'm
this is
done.
this is the first question I wanted to touch on. You were the
Yeah.
first person to introduce that concept, well, relationship-based agriculture, to introduce that concept in my life, and it probably saved me my farming career, because to do that by yourself, to be ostracized by your local peers, your community. Of course, in farming, we're not doing this in private. It's not a private business. It's right next to the highway for everyone to see your screw ups.
Yeah.
I mean, you work with producers. You have worked with producers for 40 years. I wonder about, and to be honest, it stemmed into the creation of this webinar, of trying to create a community of people
Yeah.
that all different backgrounds, different geographies, different contexts, but
Yeah.
come together on a common idea or a common goal where we can all learn from one another. So I wonder about you, just touching on the relationship-based agriculture. I think it's a
Thank
powerful
you.
concept for people to understand.
It is, Joe. Like, look, in the United States, like Australia, I don't know, like in Canada, but in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, guys, they have no government help. There is none. And I'll never forget the story of a farmer told me about a consultant, very popular consultant. They had 50 farmers that were invited to come. They were invited. You didn't just come, you were invited. This high-powered consultant stood in front of all the farmers and says, raise your hand if you spray in time. Some raised their hand. How many of you seed in time? Some raised their hand. And he said, the rest of you that did not raise your hand, he goes, I want you to go home, look in the mirror, and call yourself a taxi driver. You do not belong in the group. Why do I bring that story up? Because if you do this by yourself, it's too complex. It's too elegant. We don't have the time. That's why when I work with groups, I have a group here in Southern Missouri where we visit each other's ranch all the time. We check each other's ranch. We look, we question, we walk, we learn from each other. It's too complex, Joe. And that's why setting up test plots. And let me tell you another thing real quick. I sit in front of a large group. In fact, I did that in Regina. I said, how many of you have put check strips and calibrate your soils? 0 fertilizer, half rate fertilizer, full rate fertilizer. You know how many people raised their hand? 5 out of hundreds. And I said, what? You guys love writing checks? You love writing checks? Because you guys can't guess. You need to stop guessing. When you guys guess, you write a $50,000, $100,000 check. Stop the guessing. But here's my point. If you don't work in a group and start doing the science on the check strips and the fertilizer, using the right soil test and doing that, it's going to cost you you guys are pissing millions of dollars away. You can't do that anymore. So that's why relationship based. That's why we work in relationships, because one person by himself can't figure it out. That's my take.
Well, I'm a good student of yours, Ray. I started doing that probably, 2025 for sure in 2015.
Yeah.
I'm proud to say most of our crop now, there's no check strip needed because we're not utilizing synthetic fertilizers on the farm anymore. And this year we will be synthetic fertilizer free for the first time, which I'm absolutely stoked. That was the goal
How
going
does
out.
that feel, Joe? How does it feel
Oh,
not to write checks?
amazing. And I mean, we've got better at the management side, we've got better at the financial side. But it takes time to know that everything's going to be okay. I tell people like first generation farms or people that come from outside of an agriculture educational background. I'm like, you have the biggest advantage you could have, which is an open mind that this stuff makes sense for you because you haven't been told, been put in a box, this is how farming works and this is what you have to do. It took me a hell of a lot longer than it otherwise should have, Ray.
Yeah. And I want to tell the audience this, Joe, real quick. Look, I didn't have one professor, not one teacher, not one mentor, not one relative, not one cousin, not one uncle said, hey, if you're going to get in agriculture, your job is to emulate nature. Not one professor taught me that. It would have changed my world. They told me force it, control it, manipulate it with tillage, chemicals, fertilizer, because it's a battle and you need to kill it first. It's all about yield. That's what I was taught in college. 8 years of that. I said, I was wrong.
So, well, I was very fortunate for the people I watch all the time. I give Martin Entz, he was the organics professor at University of Manitoba. I had no interest in organic farming whatsoever, but it was 2007. I find it funny, Ray, you and I visited Gabe's farm for the first time in the same year because in '07 when fertilizer prices went nuts, we had heard of this guy, and we're only 2 hours from Gabe's place. We'd heard about this guy who was doing cover crops and intercropping with no fertilizer. So we went down to visit Gabe's farm, and
Oh, wow.
the
Wow.
conclusion, the conclusion was, you'll laugh. Well, it'll work there, but it'll never work where we live. 90 miles straight north, and we get double the precipitation that Gabe did. So I mean, change happens slow, and I look back and shake my head, but it's the pace of change, you know? And I think this is a good segue, Ray, for
Yeah. Let's
like
open it to questions.
and I mentioned that this was going to come up, and maybe this is more geared towards my own personal interest, but you've been doing this for like, well, I mean, been in the soil health world for 40 years.
Hmm.
Talk about the pace of change, your frustration,
Oh,
with the pace of change, and I guess what you've seen in the last, like, because I've noticed it since I started looking into this stuff. I was in Gabe's in '07. By 10 years later, 2017, there were still almost no resources for producers. And now it
yeah.
seems like soil health has hit the mainstream. So I'm
Oh, yeah.
curious from you've got, if you were taking a 30,000 view of the movement, what you've seen, how happy you've been with the pace, and
Oh,
what you see.
let me tell you, Joe, let me tell you, 40 years ago, if you would have asked me when I was 40 years old, I had no hope. None. For agriculture, no hope. I thought we were done. Now I have hope. Oh my goodness, it is growing. Especially, I'm telling you, this last 10 or 10 years, it exploded. When we first brought soil health, people laughed, they mocked us. The worst were the universities. They thought we were idiots. All we were talking about it was soil ecology and mimic nature. Now, all the farm magazines, unless they see microbes, you see biology. It's global. This has gone global. I get requests from all over the world, uh, everywhere. There's a group of from Brazil that farm over 1 million acres. Million acres. They're coming up to come and learn about regenerative agriculture. This is growing, Joe, because farmers are sick and tired of paying the inputs and the chemicals. They're tired, and it's not working, and the soil's getting worse. So I'm very pleased. Is it going to change, Joe? You're the next generation. Is the planet going to be healed within my generation? No. But what I do see is a movement of young farmers and ranchers coming back to agriculture and with love. And I had a 71-year-old farmer in one of our classes. There was a 38-year-old farmer and a 71. The 71-year-old got it, sold all his equipment, went to no-till and covers. 71 years old, changed his life. He says, now I'm gaining. You know what every farmer tells me, Joe, now? They love farming now. They love it. They
My
they love it.
My favorite thing is, I mean, I I have a bias towards young producers because I got lucky. I started farming in 2006, 2007, and land was cheap and inputs were cheap and machinery was cheap, and I was able to do it conventionally, make a profit. It kept me in farming. But these
Yeah,
producers that are 18 and 20 years old or 25 years old trying to get into farming now, but I absolutely, I mean, they've got it's a tough road to hoe. It's exciting and there's change happening, but I was given things that, an environment that they don't have now. But my favorite thing in the world, Ray, is talking to somebody who's 70, 75 years old, and they say, I just wish I had more time.
yeah.
I'm having so much fun farming and looking at my farm in a different way. They're like, I wish I found this 15 years earlier.
They would. And I'm going to give us some hope too about RFK. We were hoping that RFK got in. And the reason for it, RFK understands regenerative agriculture. He understands it very well because I'm in indirect communication, but RFK wants to make the soils healthy because he understands we can't fix human health without soil health. So that's big. Really excited about that. I wish we were got a Secretary of Agriculture. I don't know how that's going to work for us, but we're excited about RFK getting involved. So I still think regenerative agriculture is going to continue to grow because farmers are catching on. So Joe, I'm hopeful.
Well,
But
I was doing a meeting last week in Alberta, and a producer asked me. They said, and fortunately, I just listened to a podcast, so I was armed with stats on it. They're like, What's the best way to educate the consumer that regenerative agriculture, soil health is important? And I said, I forget who it was on the podcast, but in 2018, like 2% of people had heard about regenerative agriculture, consumers. And by 2019, it was 5%. And by 2020, it was 20%. And it's basically been doubling. And I said,
yeah,
soil health, regenerative agriculture has such a compelling story that we are what we eat and what we eat comes from the soil. I'm like, I am
yeah,
worried about the consumer picking up on this movement because it just makes fundamental sense. I
yeah,
think the holdup is going to be adaptation of producers, uh, because we have an information gap. We don't have enough Ray
yeah.
Archuletas.
And but luckily we have Joe's. And here's the thing: RFK, Steak and Shake, beef tallow now in the French fries, smash burgers in the United States, beef tallow, Popeye chicken, beef tallow. It's coming, and it's coming because we're sick. Joe, we got obesity. About 60 some percent of the Americans, diabetes, cancer, it's all going up, and people are catching on, and they're sick of it. And so I'm excited about this. I'm telling you, Joe, it's going to continue to. It's getting huge. So I'm
Ray,
excited.
I think that this is an interesting topic. Sorry to drop it on you, but
Yeah,
between what I see in the marketplace, I think there is demand from consumers because we're seeing it from companies that they're hearing it
yeah.
from consumers and they're saying, geez, we got to get on this. We need a regenerative ag program, somebody who grows wheat and oats and whatnot. But there's a gap between uh, the supply chain and the producers to advance this thing on a grander scale.
It
Because,
is. It's huge.
I mean, Ray, I have been obsessed with the concept for 10 years. Well, even longer than that, I was starting to get interested and obsessed. Now, the people I talk to, at my company, my farm, all the conversations are this. But that's a big ask of understanding for a producer that's conventionally farmed, want to change, but geez, it seems like a mountain of information that we have to consume, and trials and failures, you know?
Well, Joe, you just made a good argument. Don't do it by yourself. You just made a powerful argument. Don't do this by yourself. I was speaking in Minnesota at Aberlee. There was a guy that's creating a whole oats, a huge oat. He spent, got investors millions of dollars on infrastructure to do regenerative oats. It's coming. Kamut flour, the ancient grains are coming. I don't buy anything that's not ancient grains or any of those, because when people have autoimmune issues, this is coming. That, Joe, it's here, and now we're going to size it up, and companies are on they better be on the list, because let me tell you, when we buy Fruit Loops in the United States, we get all kinds of dying crap. The ones in Canada are better than the ones that go to Canada are better than ours, and the ones in Europe are better. And Robert Kennedy said no, no more. So quality, it's not okay. So real quick, what do I see in the future? It's not going to be about quantity. It's going to be about quality. And please, the audience needs to understand too, we're having a huge birth gap. If you go on to YouTube, there's a great YouTube video called Birth Gap. The population is imploding in itself. In the next 20 or 30, 40 years, the population is, they say by 2100, China's going to be half its size. So what are we going to do with all this grain and everything? We are not going to be able to eat all this. People ask me, well, Ray, how are we going to feed the world? I laugh at them. I said, because they throw it back. So, well, regenerative agriculture can't feed the world. I laugh at them. I said, that's not our job. We teach the world how to feed themselves. Case in point, there's this young Pasadena uh, uh, family, the Darvis family. It's got a tenth of an acre. They produce 6,000 pounds of vegetables on a tenth of an acre. They make, how many of us make $40,000 on a tenth of an acre? We can feed the world easy. Easy. That's not the problem. The problem is we need more people on the land. We need a distribution change on the land. So that's going to happen. And we don't have enough, and the population is crashing. So what are we going to do with all this corn and soybean and all these? What are we going to do with that? I think it's quality. It's about quality. That's the future.
Glad you touched on one of those points without without me asking, Ray. We are getting quite a few questions coming in, but
Okay.
I wanted to touch on a topic. I mean, I got some feedback on the Haney soil test as well, but you were the first person that introduced the Haney soil test to me. We've
Yep.
utilized it on our farm. We've done some cool research trials.
Yep.
Would you just take a bit of time and talk about Haney soil testing, what it's
Sure.
telling you, and best implementation practices on the farm, Ray?
Well, here's what I'll do, Joe. I think this will be good for your audience. If your audience would wish that I would put a whole hour teaching them how to read them, and I would be willing to do that. Look, the Haney test was discovered in Dr. Rick Haney. I met Rick Haney in 2011, and it started this way. I couldn't find a soil test that could help us predict nitrogen really well and phosphorus. It was all over the board. It's been this since the 1930s. Our soil tests have been antiquated. They're wrong. And finally, a scientist says, "Hey, why don't we mimic nature? Why don't we, for the extraction process?" Because most people don't realize when we get soil tests, what they use is they use very caustic acids. They're called extracts. And the concept is to be able to bombard with strong acids and force calcium and all these phosphorus and all that. And they get mathematical and they figure out how much can fill the exchange site. And then that's how you determine how much phosphorus and all that. Wrong approach. Totally wrong. The approach should have been is using gentle acids from the plants and their lower molarity. Finally, a soil scientist, hey, why are we forcing the answer? Why don't we ask nature? So Rick went into the literature and found the three common acids that most plants leak. acylic, malic, and citric, really gentle acids. So it's allowing the soil to speak through the soil test. Don't force the answer. And then the other part of the soil test is respiration, and it's all based on water. So finally, we have a soil test that we can pick up the other 50% of organic nitrogen that we've been missing. And I'll make this quick. When I would walk into the forest and do a soil sample, there would be hardly any nitrate, Joe. No, hardly any ammonium. I go, where's the nitrogen? And I would do it in a pasture, same thing. Where's the nitrogen? Because we were told ammonium and nitrate, those are the predominant. Wrong. Over 50% of the nitrogen is in the organic form, bound in amino acids. They are organic nitrogen. Now we've known since the 1930s, plants can take up amino acids. And then rhizophagy, we know plants eat bacteria and they use them as fertilizer. So guess what? We were wrong on a lot. So the Haney test is a powerful test to show me the forms of phosphorus that I'm missing and the organic nitrogen. I love the Haney test because it's also very sensitive. And I want to make this and to conclude with this statement. The Haney test is so sensitive, Joe. It's a snapshot in time. No soil test, and I want the audience to understand this. There is no soil test in the world can tell you the complexity of all the soil. All they can do is give you a snapshot. Same thing with a doctor. That's why a doctor has to do a blood sample, urine, fecal, CAT scan, all kinds of things on you. You're too complex. The soil is the same way, but the Haney test is a good soil test. I'll leave you with this last phrase on that. All soil tests are wrong. Some are useful. The Haney test is useful. All computer models are wrong. Some are useful. And if you guys want to learn more about that, then I could do you guys a whole hour training in the future. I would be glad to go over slowly so you can learn how to read your own Haney test.
Well, I appreciate that greatly, and Ray, and we can chat about that. I got to tell you a story. We were talking about grazing
Yep.
full season cover crops, before the webinar started. So in 2019, I was telling you about the first cover crop we'd grown the year before, and it was phenomenal. It didn't make sense based on, from a soil test standpoint. So the next year, Trav and I, we were really going to test this. So we tested the soil beforehand with a Haney soil test and a conventional soil test. We grazed the cover crop twice. We had phenomenal growth, amazing plant diversity. Came back, did the same conventional soil test and a Haney soil test. And the conventional soil test was showing virtually identical. Our pH had dropped a little bit, but from a soluble nutrient standpoint, you wouldn't have noticed any difference. The Haney soil test showed 10x increased respiration levels. Same snapshot, like same time of year. The following year, we went in and did a no fertilizer oats trial to see what did stimulating that biology, cycling those nutrients in a natural system, what effect would that have on that oat crop the following year? So conventional soil test, there was 6 parts per million nitrogen showed up on that, but we knew our biological respiration was like, well, at 10x. Those oats on 0 inputs were absolutely on par with our conventional oats on 6 parts per million nitrogen. So my university brain, that is 2 years without synthetic inputs on that crop. Where's it coming from? It's the biology. It's the diversity.
Yeah.
It's the root exits that those plants are producing and stimulating that system.
One of the things we need to tell the audience, Joe, real quick. A lot of people will accuse you if you're regen, you're mining the soil. You're taking all these nutrients. Please, audience, need to understand 98 to 99% of the plant biomass, that tall corn, that wheat, that plant comes from the air, does not come from the soil. Very little comes of the plant biomass comes from the soil. Most of it is air, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. A plant is really a latest structure of carbon molecules, mostly from the air. Very little comes from the soil. And like Joe said, the nutrients, the phosphorus, the micronutrients come from the fungi, the biology, and the living roots. But the majority of the biomass of the plant is air. So your cows eat, a majority is air. Those are sugar carbon-based molecules. Those big trees, like in the California that weigh 4 million pounds, 98% is water and carbon molecules. They are not, doesn't come from the soil. So I didn't know that, Joe. They didn't teach me that in college.
Me
So
either. 97.5% of a plant comes from the air.
the air, the air. Please let the audience, we have to hit that because you're going to freak out because the agronomist is going to say, you're mining the soil. You need to put more phosphorus. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to put more carbon in the soil.
So without going off on a tangent, these people that are on tonight have heard my shtick quite a bit. And I always say 96% carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sunlight,
Yep.
and water. That is, why don't we focus on that in agriculture more? Never once was it brought up in the 4 years I was at university that, hey, these are, obviously we knew they're important, but these make up 96%. And there's a way to capture sunlight more efficiently and infiltrate and store water more efficiently. Those are the two
You got it,
most
Joe.
important things you can do in farming, is those two things. So I think we'll get to audience questions. A few here, Ray. I got a few of my own I want to touch on too. Okay, so Lauren asks, I've had a professor say that applying fertilizers increase soil organic matter. Besides possible increasing the size of the plant, how would fertilizer be able to increase the soil organic if the insects are the ones building the soil? Curious your
Yeah. Good question. I used to think the same way. But remember, folks, I think we need to understand that fertilizer is a salt. It's the Haber-Bosch process. They strip nitrogen from the atmosphere and they put it. When the soil is super, super depleted, and it's so depleted that nothing will grow, it's okay to use fertilizer. It's kind of like a stimulant, but it doesn't feed the biology. It really doesn't. It's a salt. And the microbes don't prefer it. And besides, plants don't like that form of nitrogen, really. Besides, when you put fertilizer out there, only 40% reaches the plant. What happened to the other 60%? It volatilized, the microbes took it. A majority of the fertilizer the mafia gets it first. Plants are not first feeders. Bacteria are. They're going to get the nitrogen. So when you put that fertilizer nitrogen, they're going to use it and they're going to balance their diet. And they're going to eat carbon in the soil to balance their diet. Please understand, think of the soil like this ruminant of a cow, the ruminant of a cow. Cows always want to balance their diet. When you watch cows in the early spring, man, and they're eating that fresh grass, they get the squirts. Man, their butts are covered. When you put a bale out there, they can balance their diet. Soils will do the same thing. If you plant nothing but soybean out there or an alfalfa, and you're leaking nitrogenous compounds, you don't have enough leaking carbon, guess what the soil is going to do? It's going to eat the aggregates and the organic matter to balance its diet out. It's going to do that. So that's a misnomer about how we look at fertilizer. It's totally wrong view on how it works. The soil doesn't work that way.
Ray, I'm smiling because most of the people on here are probably thinking to themselves, "Oh, this is the guy Joe got all this stuff from." Because I to understand carbon to nitrogen, I always tell producers, I'm like, a feed test. What we're testing energy and we're testing protein. The same thing that's going on in that
Yep.
ruminant's digestive system is going on in the soil, and we need to balance the ration of the soil essentially.
Yep. And see, microbes need two things. They need carbon and nitrogen, and they're going to balance their diet. And so if you're not putting enough carbon in the soil, it's going to cannibalize itself. It's just the way it is. So you got to balance it. You're right on, Joe. That's the way
Well,
I look at it.
well, and to take it, I guess, one step further, Ray, I was listening to, I can't even remember which podcast. I listened to 3 or 4 of ones you were on today, but people don't realize the energy cost to produce nitrogen, how intense that process is. And then
Oh, it's huge.
because that nitrogen is not in plant available form, once it's put into the soil, it is now bacteria and enzymes' responsibility to convert that nitrogen
Yeah.
into plant
Yep.
available. And for every
Yep.
1 pound of nitrogen, it takes, what is it, 10 or 11 pounds of carbon energy that bacteria has to use to convert that. So start to finish, the production of synthetic nitrogen, the energy intensity is just unbelievable.
Oh, it's horrible. If you were a predator out there in the wilderness and it took you 10 times as much energy to get 1 calorie of food, you'd be dead.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. The only way we get away with it is because diesel, fertilizer, natural gas, that's what does it. And that's where we're going broke. So the more we let the system feed itself and heal itself, the less of those inputs you have to buy.
You know, I actually, he texted me right before, so I know you know who Michael Teely is.
Oh, Michael, yes.
Michael and I, like, we're good buddies and we like to talk about this quite often. But I laugh, the ethanol system, I mean, we have it in Canada as well. It is completely propped up by cheap fossil fuels, because if you don't have cheap fossil fuels, you can't produce the nitrogen to produce the corn to produce the car fuel. So I quite often laugh. I'm like, as far as devastating practices to our soil and our ecosystem,
We're not
ethanol
very we're
has
not
got to be
we,
on the top of the list.
we're not very bright. I never said we were bright, but I tell you, it's yeah, it takes a huge amount and it degrades our soils pretty badly. So that's the whole point. It's not a good system.
So, okay, Ray, I can go off on a tangent, as I'm sure you've picked up on. So I want to get to a few more audience questions. I'll see if I can join a few together. Hey,
Sure.
this one that I'm actually I've wondered about: hydroponics. How does that work?
Hydroponics. Do you know, Joe, that soils are subaquatic ecosystems? They're subaquatic. Soils don't work without water. Now, hydroponics, now there was a big argument in the organic system about how we can put all our nutrients in a hydroponics and then we're going to be organic. I laughed. I said, how ridiculous. Do you know, Joe, that you know what the most complex ecosystem on the planet with the 50% of all biodiversity? It's in the soil. It is the most biodiverse system on the planet. And you're going to pull it off with hydroponics? Really? Really? I said, this is ridiculous. Run on ancient light, energy, sunlight, and you think you're going to mimic the soil with all the organisms? Good luck. I want nothing to do with that. And so there was a big battle between the organic people saying that they allowed organic to pass. And you're still without electricity and ancient sunlight, that whole thing is worthless. And then, by the way, you might say to me, well, Ray, we can use solar panels. All Let's think about solar panels and all this whole system. In fact, the guy who promoted solar panels and he got his face on the New York Times, he was a champion of the environment. He did a recent TED talk and he said that he was wrong, that solar panels and windmills are more destructive to the environment than nuclear power. So here's my point, back circling. You're still using energy. Why don't we just grow it in the soil? You're not going to do it as well. I think it's a stupid idea. Uh, do whatever you want. I mean, people can do whatever they want, but I'm not buying my food from there. Period.
Uh, I don't want to, I was going to offer my opinions on solar panels, but seeing how it's just going to be preaching to the choir, I think I'll just
Yeah.
leave one alone,
Yeah.
right?
I think we listen to the same guy. It's not a win-win.
Well, all your energy investment is up front and you're hoping to just capture that back, when fundamentally the issue shouldn't be, we need to, plant will do it. You put a seed in the ground, it'll capture it for free that year.
Well, and
More
one thing
efficiently.
yeah, and one of the things people don't realize, once the solar panels go bad, the toxins and the metals go to third world countries and they're stored there. So it's not a good idea. So I think there's a lot of issues we have to deal with environmentally.
So, Ray, I think this Cheryl wants to know, being one of those, oh, we got a spelling mistake, being one of the conventionals that do it the way Dad did it. what's the best way to get started? I know there's probably some context you need, whether there's livestock involved or whatnot, but the last question of the webinar is going to be something related to this, but to producers that want to go down the path, what's a few things that are just really easy things to check off the box?
You know what I would do? I tell everybody, start with start with a cover crop. If I had to do one thing, Joe, one thing only, and I told this to Secretary Vilsack, cover the ground with a cover crop. Number one, start with a cover. And I don't care what your rotation is, take a piece of land and start with a cover crop. That's number one. Start bringing different species and start feeding biology. That is a great start. And take one field. If your dad and your mom or your dad's resistant, I say, Dad, give me this 5 acres. Just let me do this on this 5 acres. Plant a cover. And then watch it and put some check strips. That's the simplest way to do it. I'm telling you, it's a win-win, especially for people that are not believers and they see that themselves. Just give me a cover crop. That to me is the most important thing I can do. I don't care what system you're in, start off with a cover, Joe. I always start off, and if I start with no-tillers going into a system, they want to go from conventional to no-till, I do not start them, Joe, without a cover crop, period. It's too hard. Covers feed the soil. That's the mouth of the soil. The ancient people said the plant is the mouth of the soil. Start with the mouth. Start feeding it. That's my number one rule. Start putting some covers up there. And
Okay, I
Joe
think
can help you. Joe can help you design them.
so I think good segue. We had a question, producer was wondering about, and I mean, you just have the advantage of, I mean, amazing amount of geography within your network to cover.
Yeah.
Producer was wondering about perennial cover crops. I'd love to, I mean, that's something I'm obviously interested in as well. Like a perennial cover crop that we can uh, get a cash crop off of. Curious if what innovative producers you've met that are maybe doing something of the sorts. And then I'm going to give you a pitch, Ray, on kind of what I'm excited about and what we're implementing on our
Yeah.
farm here.
Yeah. Uh, Perennial cover crops are pretty tough. Um, I'm trying to figure it out. They're working on a perennial wheat that they're trying to work on, but in Kansas, but it hasn't produced very well. The perennial cover crops I think about usually involve cattle and how they can graze it and they take it out of that perennial system. But right now, I got a mind block on a perennial cover crop. Can you think of anything, Joe, that
Well,
comes to mind?
where I was hoping you were going, you mentioned it already, but Kernza.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. That's one. Um, oh, I can't think of another one.
Well, Ray, let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to stimulate your brain. I from this webinar where there was an idea about a month back. Actually, a producer that's on tonight. None of my ideas original, Ray. I just am so blessed with my network that I'm able to other producers try things, what they've seen success with, and then I can take all their good ideas and throw out what I don't want and keep what I do want. So I told you about our cover crop that we graze and we use high diverse cover crops to stimulate biology, integrate the livestock, so we're cycling nutrients. So
Hmm.
this year, and I'm not one to dip my toe in, we're going to do a blend. It's going to be more diverse than this, but essentially it's going to be oats and peas. We're going to have some vetch, turnip, that kind of thing, but have that crop underseeded with winter triticale and sweet clover. Intensively graze that crop twice to cycle those nutrients, stimulate that biology, get good aggregation. So I've got a functioning soil. And in year two, because we're a mixed grain and cattle operation, we open up some opportunities. So we can graze that crop that's growing the following year. We can hay that crop. We can take that crop off as a cash crop. So either combine winter trit and clover or spray the clover out and combine a winter trit crop, but with no synthetics. But because we stimulated that system the year before, if we take it for grazing, take it for hay, that happens mid-June here, we've got enough growing season that we can go back in with a warm season cash crop. But the concept is stimulate the system with diversity and integration of livestock, keep
Yeah.
something going, have multiple options in an operation like
Yeah.
ours with the grain and cattle. And at any point in those three steps, if the farm's in good shape from a forage standpoint, there's my profit. I can pull off a cash crop at any point.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think of the concept and what you would change.
So I think what I love about your whole thing is one of the things, and I think and I was listening to you, and I was listening, and I was reading Lauren's talk about losing moisture. And one of the things about what cattle does to the whole system, because we have dry years, we have fluctuations, Joe, of water in either we get it too wet or it's too dry. And what the covers do is allow us to build the aggregation and the organic matter. Without the living plants, we can't build aggregation. We can't build biology. We can't do a lot of these things that you already know what we talked about, Joe. And so anytime you can bring animals into the system, because you and I talked about this, if you were forcing me to do cash crops, I would not, and you're torturing me, I would do it with animals. Grazing animals allows that time and space, like you were talking about, Joe, how it allows you that opportunity to utilize the cover crops, build aggregates, because at the end of the day, I got to feed biology and build aggregates and get nutrient cycling. And if I can't do that and give the longer recovery times to do that, then I'm not going to fulfill. Uh, you're not going to be happy with the system because it takes us 3 to 5 years to see good nutrient cycling. 3 to 5 years. I tell farmers, give me 3 to 5 years with covers, and we could change the whole system. 3 to 5 years of intentional cover crops. So I don't think I answered your question, Joe, because I was kind of I got to be honest. I was looking at that thing. It kind of bothered me that thing from Lauren because she was talking. It
No,
bothered
that's
me
okay.
badly because you know what I was thinking. I get this all the time. Cover crops steal water. How many times have you heard that, Joe?
Daily, weekly, I guess, probably, but yes.
But here's what I want to tell you, Lauren. Do plants take water? Yes, they're designed to do that. We want them to take water. That's the way the natural system works. It takes the water out, but what happens through a period of time, then it starts building organic matter, and you start building the aggregates, and you start building infiltration. Plants create humidity on the bottom. You're starting to get a functioning water cycle. You can't do it without plants. I think that our soils are so degraded when you put plants out the first time there, Joe. They crash and burn and see they stole all the water. Well, of course, your soils are so degraded. You want a miracle from that poor plant that first year. It's not going to happen. You got to give it some time. So I'm sorry, Joe, but please give me your scenario one more time. I'm sorry. I just kind of ADHD
Oh,
on you.
honestly, that was going to be the next question anyway. Lauren's going to leave with a jacket because she's asking some really good questions here. No, the concept is an intercrop, well, high diverse intercrop, but oats and peas. So if I wanted to combine them, I could combine them, but they're
Yes.
underseeded to winter trit and sweet clover. We're going to utilize it as much as we can. That first crop for biological stimulation, intensively graze it once, let it regrow, intensively graze it again to properly stimulate that system. So going into next year, we've got a green
Yes.
living root, a, something that can be utilized for grazing, forage, cash crop, can infiltrate water, a healthy biological system.
I
That
love it.
next year I can reduce my risk because we've got a cash crop. If I want to combine it, if we need it for forage, take that forage. Still a
Yep.
stimulated system. We can go back in with another cover crop for fall
Yep.
grazing. We can go with a short
Yep.
season, something for combining. But the concept being stimulate the system up front, make that a
Yep.
healthy soil ecosystem, so we can
Absolutely.
better profit in a lower risk system in the following year.
And you know what you're going to get too, Joe? The rotational effect. You're going to get a yield bump. because you leaked different biology and it stimulated different biology. You're going to get yield increase. Absolutely marvelous. I love your concept.
Well, a lot of my concepts look great on paper and practice isn't necessarily, I'm excited about it. And I've
Oh,
learned some tough lessons and I'm looking at the risk of the system. And I mean, basically we're just growing plant diversity, thoughtfully within our context and create options for ourselves on the farm.
and Tom, document it. One thing I'm going to recommend, Tom, Joe, can you do this, Joe? Do you know what an AquaSpy is? AquaSpy? AquaSpy is a solar panel. It's a solar instrument that measures water all the way down, and it talks to your phone, and it's solar powered, and it's got a probe that goes all the way and measures water, moisture, EC, so it can measure the nutrients going down the profile. And it's like it's yours. It's like you pay $1,200 and it's yours, called AquaSpy. And then it communicates and it keeps all this data, and then you can follow your cover crops. Russell Hendrick uses them quite a bit. And so that, and then it also shows your nutrients going down because it measures EC. So you can watch the profile and you can do the timing and see all these other cool things happening. And then you can record real-time data and what these covers are doing. And so you'll go from, and because you'll have one, you go to zero to, and you'll probably put it like 36 inches. So you'll watch from 0 to 36 what the covers are doing. And then it will answer some of Lauren's questions, because now you have hardcore data showing, oh my gosh, look at this. And then the second year, you're going to go, oh, wow, look what happened here. Look at the changes that are happening. It's a great tool. I wish more people would have them in their field, and you can move it from field to field. It's called AquaSpies. Excellent tool.
I got it written down. Trav and I took a stab at a similar probe in 2019. We never did get it working right, but that it's good. And I mean, the people that are watching at Covers Go, we try and document everything that we can. I mean, and for the purpose of, I mean, science, of course, but man, cover crops, soil health, animal integration rate, it's a great story that farms resonate with, you know? It's interesting that we can stop giving our money to the input suppliers and big ag and start investing right here. The
You
most
got it.
powerful tool we have.
You got it. Science, applied science. Do your own research. Don't wait for anybody.
So I want to get to a question, Ray, because obviously you live in this world, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. If you have any information, but Darcy's wondering about baseline for nutrient dense grains, uh,
Yes.
and what lab to use. But I think a bigger question is what are you seeing as far as data from these regenerative systems, these regenerative farms, from a nutrient density standpoint? Where do you see
Oh,
this?
good. There's a great book called uh, What Your Food Ate by David Montgomery. I would recommend that book. You probably already have it, Joe, right?
I don't have the book, but I'm very familiar with David Montgomery. Yes.
Yeah. Well, David's book, him and his wife wrote this book called What Your Food Ate. And after every chapter, in fact, I'm the one that did the soil testing, and we went to 10 farms all over the country, the United States, and we compared systems, and the ones that were regenerative were always higher in nutrient density. And after every chapter of the book, it's very well researched, and they go through all the literature, and then you'll find where they send the lab, where they send to sample the grain, the meat, the milk, everything's in that book. I would definitely get that book called What Your Food Ate by Dr. David Montgomery and his wife. And that would help you quite a bit on your journey, because that's the future and we can measure it. And so why would I pay a premium for that nutrient density? And I think General Mills has been talking about this. Other big companies are talking about this. This is where it's heading, and how we can grow non-GMO, high nutrient density food.
So I want to get to this part, Ray, before I forget. So, Lauren, I am going to give you the jacket, put your address in, and we'll send it off to you. And I think Cheryl will give you the hat. So if you guys could put your address in, I'm going to steal a page out of John Kemp's book because I think it's such a thought-provoking question, Ray.
Yeah.
What is something you wish, uh, whether it's conventional farms or just more farms in general, what is something that you've seen from your experience you wish more farms had?
What I wish more farms would
I
have.
guess what tool, like what have you learned in your brain you wish that more farms had that ability or had that open mind
Yeah,
to be able to
got it.
utilize?
Um, in my journeys all over the world, if farmers would understand that the soil's alive just like them, number one, the soil's alive. It's a living organism, and you have to have a relationship with it. If I could see if that was the one thing that I wish more farmers would have, was to have that understanding that the soil is alive. It's not a machine. It's a living organism. And once you understand that, your farming changes, your grazing changes, everything changes. To be brutally honest, I have a lot of love and respect for farmers because I am a farmer. I'm a rancher. And the reality is, what I see a lot of farmers are caught up on the tools. They're either gearheads, they're great machinists, they're great engineers, but horrible ecologists, horrible biologists. And so if I would ask that, I wish that all farms is a different mindset and how and it requires a aha moment that you went through, Joe, and I do. And so that's what's lacking in a lot of farms is they look at the soil like it's dirt, just a growing medium. That's a global issue that I see. That's a real problem. And we have no love for it, no respect for it. It's dirt. And it's a common thing I see all over the world. And it's very degraded. And we're suffering as a people for it globally. That's the thing I think.
It was actually a conference you were speaking at as well, but Chris Nichols was presenting. It was one of my favorite lines. She said, and I'm going to screw up the numbers, but you'll understand what she's trying to talk about. She said, I took a 4-year degree. I forget what it was in microbiology or mycology, but she's like, I was pretty sure I knew 20% of what was going on in the soil. She
Yeah.
said, I spent 5 years doing my master's. I think it was studying mycorrhizal fungi. She said, I knew 10% of what was going on in the soil. She said, spent 25 years of my professional career. Now I know for sure I know less than 1% of what's going on.
He's right. All of
It,
us.
it, it- it's people people come to me and they use a term that I'm a soil health expert. I'm a soil health student and
Yeah.
keep an open mind of what's going on. But for somebody to say they understand fully the systems and the soil completely, that is somebody that doesn't know anything.
Walk away from them. I a PhD is you know a lot about so little. I want to know a little about a lot. Guys, farming and ranching is the most difficult job on the planet. I'm sorry, you chose the most difficult job on the planet. It changes every second, every moment. That's why I say don't do this by yourself. It's too complex. It's too elegant. You can go down a rabbit hole you would never come out. When you start studying quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and you start running behind it, all this is run, all the biological systems are run on quantum mechanics. You can get lost, Joe. This is incredible. So follow principles and do the basic things. I tell you, if you can just get the ground covered and be consistent, you can change your operation a lot and never leave it bare. Just that simple thing. And animal integration when you can.
You know, talking back about community, there was a small group of us, like 5 or 6 of us, that we were all ended up at the same conferences like a decade ago. We were all on a very similar path, but looking at all of us now, 10 years, we're still friends. We still have a group chat and talk about this stuff, but 6 very smart and curious minds, the different directions and specialties. We've all gone off in within the same soil health movement. One
Yeah.
of my buddies, grain farm, but expert in humic acid and understanding biologicals and eco-teas. And, myself, I'm obviously a plant diversity person, but without that community, I mean, just look at the access to resources that I now have
Oh,
and the work and the passion they have put in and are willing to tell me all the good stuff.
well, I was, Joe, as you were talking, I was watching Vincent's email about text as he wrote down the peer pressure is brutal. It's and if you're not, you told me the most beautiful story about your dad. I went to the coffee shop and he took all the verbal harassment, but he still lets you. It takes a really tough person and comfortable in your skin to not care what the neighbors think, because the neighbors don't make your payments. And I've gone to learn when I started this, when I was going all over the place and people laughed at you and mocked you, and they said, "Oh, there goes Ray with his little plastic jars and blah blah blah." When you're so empowered, Joe, like you are, and you're so passionate about loving and caring for people in the land, you don't care what people think. And so you just get to a point, well, you're going to laugh, do the right thing. So I saw Vincent's thing about the peer pressure, and he says, and show, educate him in what, and he's at the last, and he says, but I said it's hard to sell to get him to break free of the peer pressure, and tips on what I can sit and show him to educate on what I believe is the way. I think the best way to do that is YouTube University. Yeah, that's the only way. Show them the videos on the rain simulator. Show them some of the videos that Gabe or Ryan, and sit and listen to it. Uh, we all learn from others. YouTube University is the best college in the world. University in the world. I, if I didn't want to go to university, Joe, I wanted to ranch. I wanted to be a rancher. I didn't want to go to college. And now, thank God for YouTube. That's how it's spreading. So send it to YouTube.
Oh, I tell people, I'm like, my education started after I graduated university because I discovered YouTube and this community of people that were willing to put their crazy ideas and their trials and tribulations online.
Wow.
I mean, now we're paying it forward. Obviously, we do a lot of that as well, but it's I gave the University of Manitoba probably about $100,000. They should sign the back of that check and give it to YouTube because, well, YouTube's probably fine. But yeah, it's just the resources that exist today, it's just unbelievable. 5 years, how much more uh,
No,
information there is out there and producers that are willing to put their trials or their screw ups online for everyone to learn from.
no, if you come to my farm, I'll show you mine. Another one that said Regen Ag. Okay, where do we get a Haney test? The only lab in the world that does it right is in Nebraska. Regen Ag Laboratory with Lance Gunderson. It's in Nebraska. Look it up. Regen Ag Lab. Don't go to the other labs because they're not doing the Haney correctly. I cannot verify it. And so there's only one lab that I know, Joe. I don't know of any labs doing it in Canada that's really close. That mimics Rick's test exactly. And you have to watch carefully the protocol. They're doing the machinery and everything. So I don't recommend any other labs unless Regen Ag Lab. There's a lot of consternation here in this country because they think they say, well, I'm doing the Haney test. No, they're not. And now Lance saying, look, if you're going to do the Haney test, you have to certify you're doing the Haney test, and you got to pay $1 for the test to make sure that you're doing it certified. Because I'm not going to take risk for producers if they're not doing the right test. So,
So I always end the webinars the same way, and Ray, I can't tell you how much I've
Okay.
enjoyed our time together and appreciate you coming on. I've let you know beforehand what you meant and influencers like yourself, like Gabe, meant to me in the early days. It would have been
Yeah.
too hard without influencers like you guys. If there wasn't somebody in the back of my brain or hearing a lot of what you said tonight, if I didn't have that reassurance, it would have been too hard. So the ripple effect that you guys made, it's still being felt. Every producer that we're in front of, we ask who knows about soil health, and it's always the Understanding Ag crew, Ray Archuleta, Gabe Brown. So I hope you know and get the appreciation that you guys deserve, the difference that you
I
get.
thank you, Joe. You
Um,
make my I told the audience, Joe made my day. And just, you know what, Joe, I wish I would have been there when you and your partner saw that cover crop grow with such little nutrients. I wish I would have been there. You
it was
know,
pretty exciting.
because all of us in the audience who have kids, and when you see a child get a concept, or all of us learn, when we learn for the first time, we see something awesome. It's so exciting. So that's great, Joe. Thank you for sharing that story. It made my day, how
So
it changed your life.
I got to get to my last question, Ray, and you've kind of
Sure,
answered it, but feel free to elaborate whatever direction you want to take it. We always end
sure.
with, what's the best advice you could give to a young producer that's just starting out in farming, and it's overwhelming, it's expensive, it's scary. What's the best advice that you could give somebody that's just going down the journey of being a farmer?
Here's the life advice I would give people. Your goal is to mimic nature, not the neighbor, not the university. Mimic, be an observer. Watch her every day. She speaks to you. Listen to her. Follow the principles of soil health. Mimic nature, not your neighbor or anybody else. And learn and learn and learn. Always read. Always be a student, be an observer. And the last part of it is be humble. It's a journey of humility. If the journey, the passageway towards this of success is humility, learning and being an observer and work hard and never, ever, ever give up. I cannot emphasize humility, work hard, be a student, and emulate the natural system. Those are the things I can tell you to walk away with.
In my experience, Ray, either you go in humble or Mother Nature will humble you. You
She
have no
will,
choice.
you got it, Joe. You remember what Masanubu said? If you approach nature incorrectly, she will beat you with a stick.
I've
It's
I've experienced it. Some days
uh,
I gotta ask and say, why are you picking on me here? But she is fair, and all you can do is learn, be observant, and change things. Try and do it better next year.
well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me, and those who attended. Thank you for listening to Joe and I rant. And and
Well, I'll tell you what, Ray. I'll send you. I don't know if it'll happen tonight. I'll see what my what my wife says, but I'll send you some pictures of my first cover crop. I really appreciate you taking the time, and
I would love that.
hopefully everyone that was on tonight enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you so much, much appreciated. And for the rest of the winter, green. I don't know. You got green grass there? Is it coming?
Oh yeah, it's already green.
Well,
It's starting to green up.
it's still very white here, but 3 weeks we're gonna have green grass and we're into summer. Favorite time of the year. So safe growing season to you, Ray. Wish you nothing but
Thank you, Joe.
prosperous. Keep doing what you're doing, and thanks a lot for being on.